Is talk radio dead? Are podcasts replacing it? Joining me is Jon Ekstrom, or as you might hear him, Jon of All Trades. Jon, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jon, and congratulations on spelling your name correctly. I appreciate that.
I blazed a trail for you, man. I took the slings and arrows younger life, so you could be not beat up today.
Well, I mean, we're both fighting against autocorrect now.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is not fun.
Let me ask you about, we're two different ages. I come from the world of talk radio. I mean, I cut my teeth on talk radio. I got involved in talk radio. I love talk radio. I love the back and forth. I love the conversations you have with people that pop in. But as talk radio gets older, people don't want to put up with the commercials. People don't want to put up with all the other stuff. And the audiences are getting older. At the same time, podcasts like yours are really starting to take over. Tell me first of all about Jon of All Trades. What is it?
So Jon of All Trades is a show where I feature people from all across the employment spectrum, talking to them about what they do, how they do it, what made them successful, how they got here. And I've talked to everyone from Wall Street guys to entrepreneurs to gun store owners to tattoo shop owners to comedians. And what I like to think of it as is half shop talk, half origin story. Because what's the first question anyone asks when you meet them?
Yeah, what do you do? Is your sister Signal? I mean, yeah, what do you do?
Well, not what you ask first, but what most people ask is, what do you do? And so I'm always curious about that. And so the natural outgrowth of that was, why am I not recording these conversations? Because I'd find myself at parties, and I had a buddy tell me, he's like, not only do you ask interesting questions, you know the next interesting question to keep the conversation going. And the podcast was a great exploration of that topic. And it's gotten a lot of traction so far, 3 years going.
How hard was it to start a podcast? I mean, for me, getting involved in talk radio 18 years ago,
right.
You know, it seemed like this monolithic thing. You had to go ask permission, you did tryouts, you did this. You know, are you on the right station? Are you on the wrong station?
Right.
And at this point, I'm pretty certain everyone has a talk show. It's just that nobody ever listens to them. But everybody has a talk show.
Right.
Doing a podcast is exactly the opposite. You're not asking permission from anyone. You're just putting it up.
That's right.
How difficult is it to just put up?
It's not hard. I started my podcast about 3 years ago, and the barriers to entry are low. Essentially, what I did was I asked my friend who had started a podcast, a guy named Brad Haig. He's got a podcast still going. They just celebrated their 300th episode. And it's called Real Nerds, where they watch a new movie every week. And I asked him, I said, how hard is this? And he said, buy this equipment. Out the door, it cost me maybe $500. And from there, I struck up an agreement with a hosting company, with a social media marketing firm. And I said, okay, if you host this, I'll promote your show. And a couple of months later, it was up and going. So the barriers to entry are really low. It's easy to start a podcast.
$500.
Yeah, that's about what it cost me.
But then you've got to get traction on it. And I know what you mean. I love asking people, how do you do what you do? Why do you do what you do? It's just kind of, I'm also that geek who loves shows like How It's Made.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I want to see this big factory that turns out toothbrushes. Like, how do they do this? And so I get that. But how do you start gaining an audience? I mean, you've got thousands and thousands of listeners now. But starting, really, it's just your mom listening.
I look back on some of the early traffic that I had, and I go, cool, 27 people listen to this show. And it's like anything else. You got to build it a piece at a time. And that does take effort. It's one of those things where when I started, I've been doing PR in Denver for a decade. So my contact list is pretty great. People from all across different industries doing different types of things in different states of their career. So you go to your friends first, right? You say, I've got a show, I don't have anything to show you, would you talk to me? And from there, you start gaining credibility and you start leveling up and leveling up and leveling up. And after about a year, I was written about in the Denver Post, along with These Things Matter and a couple of other podcasts. So when you get traction like that, it's almost like being able to outlast everyone else. If you do it for long enough, an audience will find you if you continue to put out good work.
Yeah, but what amazes me about this, and it's the change in generations. All right, when I was a kid, you listened to the radio. The guy who was the programmer for that station decided what the hell you'd listen to.
Right.
And so Paul McCartney puts out Band on the Run, and they say that's going to be played, and you like it, and that's it. And now it has switched. That program directors don't really even exist. People self-program, whether it's through Pandora or iHeart or their own mixes, all the way through to now with Netflix and Hulu and the rest. We watch and listen to what we want to watch and listen to when we want to do it. And for my kids, they think this is just the way it's always been.
Right.
But this is an earth-shattering change, that with the podcasts, you can find whatever little thing you want, and it's yours. You program it yourself, and the people like you can start it. Right. Here's what hurts. There was a time when we all shared certain experiences. That if you said Lucille Ball on the chocolate factory with a conveyor belt, everybody knew what that meant. Beam me up, Scotty. Everybody knew what that meant. But today, because everyone's in their own little pocket, there are very few shared cultural experiences and very few shared entertainment experiences. And so while seeing you do so great with these and seeing all these podcasts, I can't help but feel sad that we're missing that shared experience as a culture.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, to your point, things like Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
You know, everyone watched Johnny Carson. I certainly watched Johnny Carson growing up. Everyone listened to Walter Cronkite. You know, Walter Cronkite, that's the way it was. And now, with this fractured landscape, I think Bill Simmons refers to it as the loss of monoculture. And you see that politically as well. And while that's certainly challenging, it's something that I am attendant to on my show. I want to build shared experiences. I want you to be able to connect with your neighbor. Maybe you don't know what they do, but maybe I do a show that's similar to what they do. That opens up an avenue of dialogue. My show, if there's one point to it, if there's one thing that I can convey through my show, it's I want to build empathy. And it's almost a counterpoint to exactly what you're describing. It's one of those things where if we're not all starting from the same point, how do we build bridges in other ways? And a podcast is a way of doing that, but paradoxically, I think I'm also contributing to the fractured media landscape.
Yeah, it's at some point, do we have more people doing talk shows and podcasts than actually listening to talk shows and podcasts? I think of Johnny Carson, and you can still see it on like MeTV or Entertainment or Antenna TV or something. It's like everybody knew it, and everybody watched it, and now I don't watch late night TV. I don't have it. What's exciting though about podcasts is it might replace the vacuum of local media. That we used to have two newspapers that would kill each other for scoops and did stories about local issues that counted. We had talk radio that was always fighting with each other. You had Mike Rosen and Pete Boyles, and they were the big dogs in town, and they would take on issues that were local. Now that those things are being syndicated out more, it's more and more national coverage. What you're able to do, what podcasts are able to do, is bring back that local columnist, bring back that local voice, bring back local stories that I think are getting lost.
I'd agree with you. To that end, there's a show that also won, this year I won the Westward Reader's Choice Award for Best Denver Podcast. The editor's choice was a show called Changing Denver, and it's hosted by a guy named Paul Caroli. He is getting into neighborhoods and talking about how those neighborhoods have changed. He's doing incredible work. And you're right, there are shows that exist like that, and to whatever extent it's filling the vacuum, I don't know that I could speak to that necessarily on a cultural level, but in terms of my own experience, you're right, those are some of the places that I turn for the news and the entertainment that I might have gotten from more centralized sources any number of years ago.
What do you listen to? We've only got a minute. If people wanted to tune in, first of all, people want to tune into Jon of All Trades, how do they do it? I mean, for people who've never done a podcast, where do they go?
So there's a podcast button on your phone, on iPhone and Android. You just go in there, search Jon of All Trades. It'll download episodes directly to your phone. You can go to my website. It's jonofalltrades.us, and that's Jon, as I know you like. But I'm available iTunes, Stitcher, any number of places. As for what I like, locally, These Things Matter just wrapped up. That was a great inspiration to me. The Real Nerds podcast, Changing Denver. Those are great shows with very different thrusts. So depending on what you're into, I'm sure you can find something that you really like.
What's the best national podcast?
The best?
Yeah,
the
real
one that
fast.
I took the most inspiration from is probably WTF with Mark Maron.
Really?
Yeah.
How many listeners do you think he has?
Millions.
Wow.
Because he started that when he was kind of at the end of his career. And he goes, what do I do?
Jon, thank you. Thank you. Listen for me on KHOW Radio if you're old-fashioned. Read me in the Post. Tell a friend, and we'll see you next week.